Hey everybody, we're just getting started here. We're doing new things all the time, going from YouTube to Zoom, figuring this all out on the fly. But let me just introduce Ted Sawyer. Ted is the Director of Research and Education for Bullseye Glass. He has been since 1997. I think that's 25, 26 years. I got to know Ted during the making of the Resurrection Window back in 2015. He helped Narcissus and I developed a methodology by which we made that entire window. So to this day, Ted is my go-to resource when I run into difficulties. Ted is also a teacher and a lecturer. And as you saw in the video, he's a great artist whose work has been exhibited in galleries and museums all around the world. So thanks for being here, Ted. Lani McGregor and her husband, Dan Schwerer, are the owners of Bullseye Glass Company, as we all know, I hope. Lani is an artist turned businesswoman, an educator, gallery director. She's basically an advocate and ambassador for glass artists and glass art all around the world. So many of us, Lani, owe a lot to you and all your hard work and dedication in building this community over the last 40 years. So thank you for everything you do for all of us, and thank you for being here to chat with us today. So I'm going to start off with a quick question before we open it up to everybody else. And this is the question I should have asked you when I was at your house. What does it mean, the laboratory for living with glass? Where does that come from, and why is that what you describe your house as?
Well, the phrase comes from it comes from an art critic many years ago for the Oregonian, who did a piece in the house, and it was his term, a laboratory for living with glass, and it basically means that we can send things off to labs and have them tested, or we can just live with them, and that's what we do. And over the years, decades, we've lived with a lot of art, and we've learned a lot from it. And that's my idea of a laboratory. And it's spelled with a B, dear, not with a V.
Sorry, yeah, I don't hear well all the time, but I thought that was kind of ironic talking about that with Mike Richard Whiteley's piece there. Which I hope he forgives me for that little joke. I also wanted to ask you about your museums and artwork in museums. And the thing that, I don't know if I mentioned this in the video, but what I love about your house is that it's a home that's basically has a museum collection in it. And we don't often get to see artwork in that type of setting. We go to a museum and it's a big open space with white walls, and there's thousands of strangers in there, and it just doesn't quite feel right. Even Corning, somebody mentioned to me, this is more interesting than Corning, like something about being in a real home and turning a corner and seeing something and having work that relates to itself and speaks to one another. Like, I don't know if there's a question in here, but your house feels like the way art is supposed to be viewed. And how do you think about that when you're putting artwork up? I mean, obviously, you have to think about how you want to live with it, but do you ever experience things like that where you see collections in a location that really makes them sort of sing and feel right?
Boy, that's a lot of questions for not asking a question, Tim. I guess, first of all, I just feel really grateful, Dan and I both do, to have had the opportunity to, over the years, collect these works, live with them, learn from them, change them around. It's not a static collection. Things come through. We move them within the house, but we also move them out of the house. And it's interesting that you mentioned museums, because museums are so important, and especially to our medium, because it's so young and so few people really understand what it's about. So it's important that this work go into museums, and that's one of our primary missions. So oftentimes the work starts here, not always, but oftentimes it starts here, and then we work with a museum to move it into their collections. Sometimes we move work directly from a gallery or an art fair setting into a museum, but oftentimes, again, it's after years of living with it, and that's just finding another home for it. And those homes carry a lot more power than our home does. Obviously, we do a lot of home tours. We didn't for quite a few years recently, for obvious reasons. But we would never be able to have the sort of audience that a museum gives. And the cred, the cred, that's what our field needs. It needs the exposure on that level. Not, it's lovely to have this work in a home, but it needs to be out there in the bigger world. So that can happen through museums. It can happen through gallery installations. It can happen every once in a great while. It can happen through a film like Holy Frit. And I hope that I hope that we can touch more people that way.
Well, I hope that people watch this video too, because for me, the first time I went to your house, obviously I knew what could be done from what Narcissus taught me, but walking around your house the first time, it was probably 6 or 7 years ago, and seeing all of the different manifestations of this seemingly static product that you guys make, right? It's sheet glass, and I say seemingly, that's not an insult. It's meant to say that it's sheet glass, it's Frit, there's a uniformity about it. And then when you see what happens when you put it in the hands of an artist who can use the powders to create amazing depth and use casting to create vegetal blackness and use Frit to create delicate lacy glass. All of the different ways that people use it, I don't think people know that. I think that there is this sort of perception with kiln glass that it's a certain type of thing, whether it's plates, or for me it was sort of dishware, that kind of stuff. That's what I thought it was. But for a lot of people, I think opening their eyes by showing them what's possible. And I hope a lot of people watch this video and a lot of people get to see what can be done, because that's everything. It's exposure. Yeah.
It is exposure, and I think the versatility of this medium is not understood. When someone says glass or art glass specifically, they think of blowing for the most part. They don't think about kiln forming, and they really, even if they think about kiln forming, as you admitted to, Tim, they have a very narrow perspective of what they think it is. The versatility is just immeasurable. We've only just scratched the surface. This is a material, this is a medium that can range from jewelry to the architectural scale. And that's what the world doesn't know and needs to.
Yeah, that's really good. Ted, are you here with us? Can I ask you a quick question?
Sure thing.
I put for the first time my work up in Lani's house that fateful day. You've had your work there for a while. What was it like the first time she said, "I want to put your work in my house"?
Gosh, what a question. It's a tremendous honor to be among all of the work of people who've done just amazing things, who I've worked with, I've admired, who I think have broadened the frontiers of what can be done with glass so dramatically. And it's also very satisfying to see the work in a home as opposed to in a gallery. So yeah, it's a great feeling to have the work in Lani's house.
Cool. That piece too, I love it, because when Lani said, is it meant to be seen with backlight? Is it meant to be seen this way or that way? Most artwork, all artwork is meant to be seen a certain way, but not glass. It's like the only thing. And thinking about Kate Clemens' piece and your piece and everything that it's got reflection, it's got refraction, transparency. You can put it on a wall, you can put lights behind it, you can put it in a window, and the versatility, which leads me to this question that somebody asked here in the chat. Lani, can you tell us about a particular observation you have about the glass from living in it? Any behaviors you didn't expect or anticipate?
Okay, well, that's pretty broad. Artists are brilliant at doing things we don't anticipate. And as the video, I think, made clear, a lot of those unanticipated things are failures that artists turn into masterpieces. The things that are most unanticipated at the point it gets into a home or a museum, I hope not, is hanging systems. I want to say, if there's any one thing I can say to anybody working in this method, understand glue and hanging systems. The only major disasters we've ever had have not been the glass exploding, have not been things that were incompatible or poorly annealed. They were things that were attached to brackets improperly. They were things that were not just, anyway, they know how to glue.
Yeah.
Can I
Well,
say?
I
And
think
that's
also,
Ted can address that better than I can.
yeah, but I think also just in that question, I think one of the things is, did you ever bring something into your house and hang it somewhere and go, oh my God, I didn't know that was going to happen, or I didn't realize when the light did this, like about glass. That's the thing about glass. You put it somewhere, and it's not just where you put it; it's what's around it and what's behind it. And like,
Oh,
right, like you bring it in and you don't really know where it's going to go until you see how it fits, right?
yeah. And we work very closely with a lot of the artists, and in especially, for instance, this house has had major renovations twice. The last one was in 2015, 2016. And the piece behind me on the wall here, the Jess Loughlin piece, I think we went through about 40 shades of gray. What you put behind a piece with sort of translucency, this is a gray that allows the piece to be what you see at this moment. It went through stages where it was baby blue. It's because the color of the gray. So the wall color behind a work, especially if it's got some transparency. Again, Loughlin, I hate to say, keep picking on her, but we have a lot of her work. There's a piece downstairs that's simply a white opaline over a black that transmits or reflects a blue coloration. But depending on the light when it's on it or not on it, changes. So all of those things, the glass is so really alive that it is hard to predict, and it's fun to not be able to predict.
Yeah, no, and the lighting on top of it too. Like I'm noticing the light on that piece. If it's depending upon the color of the light bulb you put in there,
Oh
you know,
yeah,
it's going to change it and affect it in the shadows. It's kind of maddening, but it's really fun. I love it when I'm doing my glass stuff that I get to, like, I don't start until I know what is possible when I'm done. I have to think about those things from the beginning. I won't work on a light table that's the wrong light color if I know it's going to go somewhere that's not going to have that color. If I know a piece is going to go in natural light, I want to make sure that I work on it. Like the Dan piece, I put it in natural light every single time I could, when it wasn't covered in glass, because you have to know ahead of time, because it can totally spoil it if you make something without knowing where it's going to go. Yeah, I do want to follow up with Ted about hanging glass. Does it drive you crazy when having to try to figure that out? You've been trying to figure it out all these years and work on it, or do you enjoy that challenge, Ted?
Well, there are just so many things. I mean, when people say, how do you hang glass? It's like, how long is a piece of string? Like what piece of glass are we trying to hang? Where are we trying to hang it? Is it opaque? Is it opalescent? Is it transparent? How large is it? How heavy is it? I think the biggest challenge that we had ever in terms of figuring out a hanging system, or the first really big challenge, was when we created a hanging system for Klaus Moyer's Portland panels, choreographed geometry, which are now at the Corning Museum of Glass. And we did a bunch of research, and we found a Dow silicone product that was rated at such that we could hang the weight necessary. And then we did testing with it, and we found that it could actually withstand over 50 times the weight rating and still not fail. So, figuring out what the right adhesive is and the preparation of the surface is one part of it, but then you need to think about the entire system. Like, you can get a beautiful rail onto a piece, but then you need to make sure that wherever it's going to be hung, the wall can withstand the weight and the hanging system that you've created, and that there's also an easy way for things to be hung in the exact appropriate orientation. In the case of the Portland panels, that meant making sure that they were going to be able to be entirely square and plumb and flush. So we actually ended up making a system where it was essentially a little wall that was right behind the piece that the piece was hanging on, and then that wall would be something that you'd install on the wall, make sure that was all squared up, and then you'd hang the piece on it. So am I interested in this issue? I'm very interested in this issue.
Someone's asking about a class. Do you teach a class about hanging? Does Bullseye have something for that?
We have a video that talks about how to attach French cleats, which is born directly out of that work we did on the Moyer piece. There's not a sort of omnibus treatment of how does one hang glass, but it's a great question. And I know that during your workshop, A Painterly Portrait in Glass, people were always asking about hanging systems.
Yeah, I think we need to collaborate on something like that shows all the different ways of doing it. That's one thing that blew me away. I mean, there's the Emily Endo piece hanging over your dining room, Lani, that's like, I don't even know how you conceive of that piece, much less come up with ahead of time how you're going to hang it. There's a whole framing system above it. Can you talk a little bit about that piece, Lani?
No,
Ha, there it is.
I'm just happy that it hasn't fallen. No, first of all, each one of those elements is fairly light.
Right.
And there was a well, can I show it? There was a structure, a circular structure. The biggest trick was getting that circular structure up in between all the other trusses in order to attach each one of those little hanging petri dishes individually. But it went up in parts. It was actually Michael Indo, his brilliance, who got it up there and got it hung.
It's incredible, yeah. This is a good one from Ron Garcia. Did Rafael Cauduro express his inspiration or philosophy behind the pieces he made of the skulls?
Actually, Ted, you probably worked more closely with Raphael than I did.
I could say some things about that. First of all, in the video, he definitely talks about, or you mentioned that he said he was looking for the unbeauty of glass. So making glass, which is always so pretty and delicate, finding something that had a type of beauty that was a little bit more savage and visceral. And I think he achieved that. Specifically, if you look at all of Cauduro's work, you'll see that there's a theme of decay and of time passing. So there are many paintings that he's done where it appears to be, when you look at it, it looks like a photograph of a wall with posters that are shredded and falling off and paintings that are disappearing against that wall. And then you realize that it's actually the entire wall is the painting. And so he's very interested, or he was very interested in this idea of distress and decay. And he did a piece, I recall, that started with, at the top, all of the faces fully fleshed out. And then as you move down it, in successive degrees of decay. So it's very much like a memento mori approach to things. It's also connected to what I think Lani referred to in the video as a Toltec theme, which is at the outside of the ball courts in Mesoamerica, in Mexico, in the Yucatan. There are always these racks of skulls or these carvings of skulls that are in the limestone, but those were carvings that represented actual fleshy skulls that would be hung outside of city gates or near the Colosseums as well, of captives of war, victims of sacrifice, etc. So, you know, it's just lightweight, fun stuff.
It's not lightweight. That's the
Actually,
thing about glass.
An anecdote related to that, Ted, I don't know if you've heard this one, but as you mentioned, Raphael created not just in glass, but in many other media, but oftentimes with this sense of the decay of things. And naturally, his paintings would decay. And at one point, he visited a collector of his work and was quite shocked to find that there was a piece on this theme, and it was perfectly, it was if it had been made minutes before. And he said, he asked for some explanation about the work, and the collector said, oh, it's been fine. It's been a problem every year. We've had it restored because it keeps coming apart. So no matter what the artist does, you can bet that somebody could very likely fix it.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Restored anything in our collection.
Well, okay, so it's reminding me of something about glass that drives me crazy, but is also incredible, is that as difficult as it is to deal with in terms of the weight, the creation, the installation, the lighting, and all of these things, the other side of it is that it really is the most stable and long-lasting type of art form that you could possibly create because it's a natural material. So I am now ruined by glass, and I want all art to be made in glass. Has it ruined your ability, Lani? This ties into a question that someone asked, to collect any other art that's not glass? Because I can't even look at a painting now and without going, it's just cosmetic. Like it's sort of ruined my ability to appreciate other types of art. Do you have other things in your collection that are not glass?
Yeah, we do. And quite honestly, it's one of the things that we love the most about this particular form and method of glassworking is that it's very accessible to artists from other media. So we've done a number of residencies, group residencies. In fact, you had alluded to the one with Narcissus Qualiata, painters and printmakers. So as we're collecting glass, we're also trying to be collecting artists and craftspeople from other material and converting them. And in the process, the conversion goes both ways. I love, well, in fact, right in back of me, there's a piece of wood by David Nash, who I met at a glass forum 20 years ago in Northlands in Scotland. And what artists from other media do with glass helps me to understand their own medium a little bit more, or at least to look at it more closely. And so we collect wood, photography, painting, ceramics, not to the extent that we do glass, of course, but I love the crossover, the creative mind applied to all these various materials is fascinating to me.
Someone's asking, as a mom and an artist who has a 5-year-old in her studio, how do you balance the spirit of wanting it to be touched and experienced by all with the fragility of glass? I know I want to touch everything. You tried to break my finger off, but you have to have signs up everywhere when people come over?
No, and we have had pieces broken by visitors. They've never been kids. So we absolutely adore working with kids. I adore having them on tours. I adore stalking them when there are groups of them going through museums, because I love to watch their reactions to the artwork. It's so much more interesting than adults' reactions to artwork or my own. And I think people are unnecessarily worried about children in glass.
Tim, could I interject really quickly? You did this question about the longevity of glass and its archival qualities and how that affects the way I perceive other media. I mean, the medium I came from before glass was ceramics, which is also incredibly archival compared to many other materials. And one of the things Rafael Cauduro said when he encountered glass was he described it as being monolithic. In other words, the entire piece is all one material. When you are working on canvas with paint, paint is basically colored glue, and you're using brushes to glue a painting onto a substrate. whether that's wood or canvas or linen or paper or whatever. That means that those two things eventually are going to come apart. And of course, you have the fact that any pigment that's put into glue is going to be fugitive in some way. It's going to change color over time. And this is something that glass doesn't do. So even though, paintings that are painted today are probably they'll certainly last my lifetime if they are color fast pigments, part of me knows that, in 100 years and 200 years, that's going to look completely different. And the thing is that the work in glass, it's going to continue to look exactly the same way for pretty much ever, as long as it doesn't get smashed somehow. So it's this really interesting thing that it's resolutely archival in ways that many other things are not. And at the other end, it's maybe vulnerable in way other materials are not.
Yeah, no, I love that. Let's see, what else is coming in here on the questions? Let's see, have I missed anything that's come by, Ted, that you saw that you, or did you have anything specific you wanted to ask Lani? I mean, I know you don't get to see each other very much, so.
I think one of the things that I wonder about when I look at Lani's collection is just, do you know or have a personal connection to all of the artists whose works are at your house?
I would say the majority, not all, but the majority. In glass, certainly. Yeah.
Is that important to you?
Actually, it used to be more than it is now. I am curious about the artists, but I once invited a major collector of a major artist's work to meet the artist, who I was surprised to find out had never met the artist whose work he collected in such depth. And so I arranged this dinner in New York, cost a fortune, invited them all there, and was later informed by the collector that he didn't want to know the artists. He didn't want to be impacted. He didn't want his relationship to the art to be blurred by his like or dislike of the artists, and pointed out that his father had been friends with a lot of artists and ended up with a really crappy collection of art. And I thought, boy, did I waste some money on that dinner. But of course, how can we not? I love meeting artists. There's some of them right here in this audience that I adore, and you know who you are. And I wouldn't want to live with their art without knowing them as well as I do. But I also don't want, if I don't like an artist personally,
I know,
I don't want that to in any way impact how I feel about the artwork.
I was just thinking that, like, what if you bought something and then you loved it, you hung it over your mantle, and then you met that person and they were just the biggest asshole in the world? How could you live with that peace, knowing who, like, I like that guy's approach of not knowing anybody. That's risky to know these crazy artists. It could affect everything in your in your collection.
Tim, I have a question for you, which is, what are there questions that you don't like to answer about your work?
Oh yeah, I bet it's the same ones that you don't like to answer. It's anything about the meaning of it. I think as an artist, I hate being asked. When I was young, I loved having meaning behind my work. I loved thinking I was clever and I had good ideas. And so what I would do is I would shoehorn those ideas into my artwork. And I look back at it now very in a sense of like, why did I do that? Why did I feel like it was so important? It helps me a lot to be a glass artist, because I think it frees us to some degree from having an idea. We can just say the medium is my idea. I mean, isn't it enough that this incredibly beautiful, versatile medium is in front of you? Do you have to know what this means? Like the piece that you did with that I said 1 kid, 2 kids, 3 kids. That's more interesting to me than what you thought about when you were making it. So I think that's the question, is what does it mean? Like, why did you do this? Or what's the concept behind that? I've gotten away from that, and it's freed me a lot to just do beautiful things. And I like that. You know, I just saw a quote from Saul Bass recently, the typographer. I just want to make beautiful things. Isn't that enough? So I kind of am in that zone right now. That doesn't mean it can't mean something to somebody else. And I think it's great when somebody finds meaning in my work, but it's that question: what does it mean? You know, what is the theory behind this piece? So somebody asked this question twice, and I want to throw it out there. How do you explain to use glass to somebody who doesn't know what it is? Like, you know, as a group of people like we are who are trying to create more interest in the medium, how do we explain it to somebody? You know, Lani, what's fused glass?
Well, first of all, we typically call it kiln formed.
Okay.
And that's what it is. It's formed in a kiln, but the methods and the details of doing that are so varied that I would have to have a specific piece in front of me.
Well, I'm guessing it's the question is probably more about how do you sell it to somebody, a young artist who goes, wait, what medium are you? I could do anything. I'm a painter. I'm this. But what does your medium have to offer? I guess that's more of the question.
That's interesting because I've never considered trying to sell anyone on doing it. It sells itself. I'm really delighted. We do a lot of tours for people who don't know anything about glass, tours of people who come from totally different backgrounds, and they are so mesmerized. I don't have to sell it.
We just have to play this video, maybe. Maybe that's all you have to do is send them a link to this video. Right? I mean, you're right. It's true that seeing it does a lot more than talking about it.
Well, Tim, I was recently at a dinner with people that I haven't seen in about 20 years. And I was there with my partner, who most of them had not met. And they kept saying, you know, Anita, Ted's a glassblower, right? And she would say, no, he's not a glassblower. He works with glass in a kiln. And they're like, what does that mean? And it's pretty simple. It's like you take glass, you set it up in a kiln, and you fire it. And the way you set it up determines how it comes out of the kiln looking. And the thing about it is that you're really only limited by the size of the kiln. And you can have some very big kilns. But the fact that people, whenever you mention glass, bring up glass blowing, has a lot to do with a few very critical things that have happened culturally. And they really sort of begin with what Dale Chihuly did in really helping bring glass to the public conscience or consciousness starting in the 80s and into the 90s, where, you know, everybody understood what that was. His work was in museums, it was in public gardens, and there were a lot of documentaries made about it. And then now people, if you mention glass, they'll say, oh, I just love Blown Away, which is, you know, it's fantastic. I love that show. I enjoy watching it. I think that what gets done in glass blowing is amazing. It's also really, really different than anything that I do and what many of all of us here do. And so I think that, you know, one thing that could help us all would be if there were some way for more people to see an example of what kiln form glass could be. Like your YouTube channel is brilliant, but you also were the star of a film called Holy Frit that I know we're all very interested in seeing get to the big screen, because if it gets to the big screen, for one, it saves us all an irritating conversation at dinner parties. But for two, it's going to be something that helps elevate the awareness of this medium to a level that is unprecedented, and people will understand it, people will get it. And so I'm just wondering how the heck we get Holy Frit to the major theaters.
That's a good question. I don't know how many of you know this, but in the last month, we saw that there's an article that came out about stained glass being an endangered craft. So it's officially on the list of endangered crafts, meaning that it's not being done as much as it used to be done, and it's not being used in churches, and it's not being taught as much, and there's not as much money being invested in apprenticeships. And so that, as we're rolling out Holy Frit, it just makes me go, yeah, this is all sort of, it all makes sense to get this film out there. And Justin and I and our little team here have been working really hard to figure out the best way to get the most people to see it, because I think when you have a film that kind of unlocks the general audience with something that's not super inside baseball, where it's really a universal story about people, but then in the background you have this amazing, beautiful thing. It's a great way to get people exposed to it. So those of us who have seen the movie, and we've heard amazing things, know that it has that effect. But we have to get it in front of more people, and the best way to do that, we believe, is through the movie theater. It's where it's had its best impact in terms of the festival. So we have a fundraiser that is posted here in the chat that we're just looking to get a couple, if everybody in the kiln glass community and stained glass community gave a couple of bucks, we would reach our goal really fast. So we are, and it's not about us. It's not about, this sort of promotional thing. It's about the whole community of glass artists. And, we talk about how do we get people to learn about kiln forming? How do we get them to learn about stained glass? By showing them how great it is. We all know it's great, but the exciting thing about glass is that it does have this blue ocean in front of it. Lani said yesterday, she's like, hey, kiln forming can't be an endangered craft. We're not known enough to be endangered. We haven't gotten to that point where we can be taken back down. We still are climbing this mountaintop. So anything that any of us can do, you guys, I'll just say, share it with your friends, share the link that's in the chat here, and do what you can to help us out there. I also, getting past that, I want to have a funny story about what you said about glass blowing. I did a piece for a guitar. I did a fused glass guitar top, and it was kiln formed. It was slumped. It was made in the kiln. There was some painting in it. And it's all glass, and it's all done in the kiln. And so somehow it got into the hands of Zach Brown. The Zach Brown band is a big country band, and he saw it, and he said, I want to play this on stage. He got up on stage, lit the thing up. Everyone went crazy, and he goes, check out this blown glass guitar. And I was like, no. And that was like, okay, that's just what people think about. And we have to change that. It's up to all of us to do it, I think. God knows Lonnie's done it for 40 years. I think you should be passing the baton, because you've created a really fertile environment, and the rest of us need to carry it forward, really. Anything else to say about Holy Frit?
Well, Tim, I did have another question just about that. There's something, I guess I'm a little like, I've seen this fundraiser. Of course, I'm giving money. And it's a little confusing, though. Why is it that in this day and age, a film this good that wins all these awards and has a distribution company, why do you need money? It seems bizarre to me that it's like something seems like it's broken or changed in the way films come to the big screen.
Well, I just learned this because I'm not a film guy, but I've been in this little mini game for a little while now, and I'm just now understanding the answer to that is a couple of things. First of all, documentaries, generally speaking, don't get into the movies very often, even at a good time. But the other big thing is just that the theaters and the producers and these companies are not taking chances on movies that are not Superman or Marvel or something that they are certain that they could sell and tickets to, and they fill up all the theaters. And so it's just, we live in a time now where it's just everybody's getting squeezed out, especially independent films and especially independent documentaries. So we're doing it ourselves because we believe in it. And so we have to sort of charge our way through there by raising money and saying, here's money, theater. We're guaranteed that you're going to have some money here. And the promotional people and the people who are doing the work to do articles and news stories about it and send Justin and I to these premieres all around the country. We think that's the way to do it. And we saw people react in the movie theater, but they're just not opening doors to people like us. We have to break those doors open, and it takes money to do that, unfortunately. But it's coming, and everybody who asks about it, one way or another, either we're going to be in the theaters this fall or we'll be out on streaming after that, hopefully afterwards. But everyone's been real patient, and it's great. I want Lani to jump back in here because I've been looking at this question that I wrote a while ago. And are you still with us, Lani, or did you get the Holy Frick conversation? Are you there?
I think I'm still with you.
Okay, good. I want to know more about the house, because the house to me, like, I'm amazed by what you told me, and I don't think everybody knows how you guys actually kind of built the house the way it is. You didn't just walk in one day, bulldoze it, and build this big, beautiful thing. This was you guys getting dirty, and I say you guys mean Dan, I think. But tell us a little bit more about how you created this thing over the last however many years.
Oh my God. I get tired thinking about it. Dan started with an erector set when he was 5 years old, and he just hasn't stopped. He went on to engineering school, then he built a factory, and he builds everything. He built the Lear at the factory. He built all sorts of stuff. And when he bought this house, which was actually about 3 years before we met, that was back in '83. I think he bought the house in '79. It was just a pile. It was a dump on the side of a hill. And before I got here, he'd knocked down a couple of interior walls, but then we just started talking about, well, let's put some decks on it. Let's do this, that, or the other thing. And what really seems to inspire him is if I leave town and he has nothing to do, he starts building models. And I come home, and in the middle of the night, I get out of my damn lift and I open the front door, and there's a model. In fact, I'm looking behind me right now. I think there's a few models out there in the background. But one has got a conservatory for the house in Scotland. The other one that he had to take out of the room because it was making me crazy is a staircase, a glass staircase. It looks like a staircase to heaven. And he'll build it, but first he makes it out of balsa and little pieces of glass and styrofoam and blah, 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 blah. And then eventually he builds it.
And that's how the house came to be, little by little. But I mean, there's some major stuff. Like, he must have had to do some heavy, to build in a hill like that, adding rooms and walls and things. I mean,
well, actually, the way it started was that when I first moved in here, and it was this rickety little wooden house on the side of a hill, and the carport was at street level, and then it dropped down below the carport at about 2 floors. And every time I would drive the car in, the carport would rattle. And I said, this thing's going to fall out from under me at some point. And he said, no, it won't. Trust me, I'm an engineer. And certainly, sure enough, one Friday afternoon, I drove home from work and the carport fell out from under me. That was the beginning of the serious remodel. We put a steel carport out there that the neighbors called the bridge to nowhere. And from there, we just kind of built onto the steel carport. And whenever possible, we stuck some glass into it, because that's fascinating. I mean, you've been talking here about the sort of the longevity of glass. That's amazing. That's all I can say. We do things, we try them. If they survive, they do. If they don't, they don't. And fortunately, nothing else has fallen out from under me recently.
That's amazing. Yeah. My question, Lani, is that we follow you on Facebook. We see the things that you write, and we know your history and your just your worldliness. And I would like to request that you write a book, a coffee table book, or something that has amazing images in it, something that has beautiful stories and pictures. Have you ever thought about that?
Briefly, yes.
Briefly, okay. Well, I'm just putting in a request, official request.
Okay, it's official. Thanks, Tim.
Okay. Here's a message from Marty Blair. I know Marty. It's a nice message here. We're getting to the end of this, guys. We're an hour in, so thanks for your patience. Technology is a thing that we've all got to deal with, and we're learning as we go. Did I miss any questions or any topics or things that we need to discuss? Ted or Lani, can you think of anything that I missed?
As soon as we're out of here, I'll remember all of it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. This meeting is being recorded, by the way. So everybody who's registered will get a recording emailed to them. So whatever you missed. All right, everybody. It's 12:35 here. We'll leave the chat open for a few more minutes. The video on YouTube will be there. So it's not going anywhere. Please, if you can, subscribe to our channel and hit the notifications bell and all that. We're releasing videos monthly, larger ones, and then we're doing small, short videos every week. Ted and I are teaching another portrait class coming up soon in the fall. So if you want to learn how to do a portrait in glass, go to the Bullseye website for that. And yeah, thanks everyone for doing this with us today. Thanks for enduring the technical difficulties. Most especially, thank you, Lani. I know that you're a busy person. You're traveling a lot, and we're glad we caught you in between trips.
Good way to spend it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So thanks to everybody who came. It would be more fun if we could do it live. Maybe someday we will.
Yeah, there was a question about that. Maybe I'm going to ask you that now because, how do we get people into your house to see this tour live?
Uh-oh.
Is there a sign up genius somewhere? Can we go to a page and just
I see Sylvia laughing because I know she knows how to crawl through windows.
drop your address in the chat, maybe?
Locked windows.
Yeah. No, I'm kidding. Well, I think that you guys enable a lot of people to get in there, and it's amazing that I know so many people who've seen the collection live, and if you get a chance, befriend Lani. That's the key.
And there's another one on the other side of the world too.
That's right. We didn't get into that one.
And you're going to see that too, Tim.
We didn't get into that one, but there is another collection on the other side of the world that we'll do the next video. We'll talk about Scotland.
Sounds good.
So we'll leave the chat. Thank you too, Ted. Any final words from you, sir?
I just wanted to say thanks to you, Tim, thanks to Justin, thanks to the crew at Vitrionics for putting together this event. The video that you did of Lani's house is wonderful, amazing. I know a lot of great stuff had to end up on the cutting room floor. I think you treated the subject well, respectfully, but still with your sense of humor. So I'm just so appreciative of the work you did there. Thanks, of course, to Lani for letting us all go through the house. Thank you for co-leading this company that I get to be a part of, that we all benefit from so tremendously. And thanks to all of you who came today and for all of the work that you do. We're doing something important in the world. We're trying to make the world more beautiful, more meaningful. And it means so much to me. You all validate everything that we do by being here, by supporting the work that Tim and Justin and their team are doing, and by making great work in glass. So thank you all.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ted. All right, with that, everybody have a great weekend. We'll leave the chat open here for a couple minutes, put on a little bit of music, and thanks again. Stay in touch, and you'll get a recording of this video soon. So take care. Bye-bye.